The history of the Jewish people is one of the longest continuous stories of any civilization on earth, spanning more than 4,000 years. It is a history shaped by faith, exile, survival, persecution, cultural achievement, and an unbroken sense of identity. Unlike empires that rose and fell, the Jewish people survived without a kingdom for centuries, preserving their traditions, laws, and memory across continents and generations. To understand Jewish history is to understand how a people can lose land, power, and safety yet still endure. Jewish history traditionally begins with the biblical patriarch Abraham, who lived around 2000 BCE in Mesopotamia. According to Jewish tradition, Abraham entered into a covenant with one God, rejecting polytheism in favor of monotheism. This belief in a single, all-powerful God was revolutionary at the time, and would later influence Christianity and Islam. Abraham's descendants, Isaac and Jacob, formed the foundation of the Israelite people. Jacob, later named Israel, had 12 sons whose families became the 12 tribes of Israel. A major early chapter of Jewish history is the story of slavery in Egypt and the Exodus. According to tradition, the Israelites were enslaved by the Egyptians for generations before being led out by Moses around the 13th century BCE. The Exodus is not just a story of escape, it is central to Jewish identity. During this journey, Moses received the Torah, including the Ten Commandments, forming the core of Jewish law and ethics. This moment transformed a group of former slaves into a people bound by law, faith, and responsibility. After years of wandering in the desert, the Israelites entered the land of Canaan, where they formed a loose tribal confederation. Over time, the need for unity led to the creation of a monarchy. Saul became the first king, followed by King David, who established Jerusalem as the capital. David's son, King Solomon, built the first temple in Jerusalem, which became the spiritual and religious center of Jewish life. This period marked the height of ancient Israelite power, culture, and unity. However, after Solomon's death, the kingdom split into two, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. This division weakened the Jewish people. In 722 BCE, the Assyrian Empire conquered the northern kingdom of Israel, leading to the disappearance of the so-called 10 lost tribes. In 586 BCE, the Babylonian Empire destroyed Jerusalem and the First Temple, exiling much of the population to Babylon. This was a devastating moment, but also a turning point. Judaism adapted, shifting focus from temple worship to prayer, study, and law. When the Persian Empire conquered Babylon, the Jews were allowed to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple, known as the Second Temple. Yet many Jews remained scattered across the Persian Empire, beginning the long era of the Jewish diaspora. During this time, Jewish texts were compiled and preserved, and Jewish identity became portable, no longer tied only to a single land or building. In the centuries that followed, Jewish lands were ruled by successive empires: Persian, Greek, and Roman. Greek rule introduced Hellenistic culture, which some Jews adopted and others resisted. This tension led to the Maccabean Revolt in the 2nd century BCE, a successful uprising that restored Jewish independence for a brief time. The rededication of the temple after this revolt is commemorated by the festival of Hanukkah. Roman rule, however, proved disastrous. In 70 CE, after a major Jewish revolt, Roman forces destroyed the Second Temple. In 135 CE, another rebellion led by Bar Kokhba resulted in massive Jewish deaths and Jerusalem was renamed, and Jews were largely banned from their ancestral capital. This marked the beginning of nearly 2,000 years of exile for most Jews. With no temple and no state, Jewish life reorganized around rabbinic leadership. Scholars known as rabbis preserved Jewish law through the Mishnah and later the Talmud, monumental works that guided religious, ethical, and daily life. Synagogues replaced the temple as centers of worship, and study became a sacred act. This transformation allowed Judaism to survive without political power. During the early medieval period, Jews lived under both Christian and Islamic rule. In the Islamic world, particularly during the Golden Age of Islam, Jews often experienced relative tolerance. Jewish scholars, philosophers, doctors, and poets flourished in places like Baghdad, Cordoba, and Cairo. Figures such as Maimonides made lasting contributions to philosophy, medicine, and Jewish law. In Christian Europe, however, Jewish life was far more dangerous. Jews were often blamed for plagues, accused of ritual crimes, and subjected to discrimination. They were barred from owning land and forced into occupations, such as moneylending, which later fueled stereotypes and hatred. During the Crusades, entire Jewish communities were massacred. Jews were expelled from England in 1290, from France multiple times, and from Spain in 1492. The expulsion from Spain was one of the most traumatic events in Jewish history. Spain had once been a center of Jewish learning and culture. Suddenly, hundreds of thousands of Jews were forced to convert, flee, or face death. Many migrated to the Ottoman Empire, North Africa, and Eastern Europe. These Jews became known as Sephardic Jews, while those in Central and Eastern Europe were known as Ashkenazi Jews, each developing distinct traditions, languages, and customs. In Eastern Europe, particularly in Poland and Russia, Jews lived in large communities but faced periodic violence, known as They were restricted to certain areas, denied rights, and targeted during times of political instability. Despite this, Jewish religious life, scholarship, and culture continued to grow. Movements such as Hasidism emerged, emphasizing spiritual joy and devotion. The 18th and 19th centuries brought both hope and danger. The Enlightenment encouraged ideas of equality and citizenship, leading some European countries to grant Jews civil rights. Many Jews began to integrate into broader society, contributing to science, literature, politics, and finance. At the same time, modern anti-Semitism emerged, replacing religious hatred with racial ideology. Jews were portrayed as an alien race rather than a religious group. This hatred reached its most extreme form in Nazi Germany. Adolf Hitler's regime blamed Jews for Germany's problems and promoted conspiracy theories that portrayed Jews as enemies of humanity. During World War II, the Nazis carried out the Holocaust, systematically murdering 6 million Jews, men, women, and children through ghettos, mass shootings, labor camps, and extermination camps like Auschwitz. The Holocaust was the deadliest genocide in history and left a permanent scar on Jewish consciousness. After the war, Jewish survivors were displaced, traumatized, and often unwelcome in their former homes. This catastrophe strengthened support for Zionism, a movement advocating for a Jewish homeland. In 1948, the State of Israel was established. For many Jews, Israel represented safety, self-determination, and the end of exile. For others, it became a source of political conflict that continues today. Since the creation of Israel, Jews have lived primarily in two major centers, Israel and the United States. Jewish life today is diverse, religious and secular, traditional and modern. Jews contribute to science, technology, medicine, art, business, and politics worldwide. Yet anti-Semitism has not disappeared. Hate crimes, conspiracy theories, and discrimination still exist in many forms. Throughout history, Jews have survived because of memory, education, and community. Jewish tradition emphasizes questioning, learning, and responsibility. Even without land, armies, or power, Jewish identity endured through texts, rituals, and shared history. The story of the Jews is not only one of suffering but of resilience, creativity, and survival against impossible odds. The history of Jews is ultimately a story about humanity itself, how belief can shape identity, how memory can defeat erasure, and how a people can lose everything except who they aren't, still survive.